Hey everyone, and welcome back to another mini review on the Movie Mitch channel. I am Matthew, once again, joined by my wonderful co-host and best friend.
Go on.
Hey man, lovely to see you. So, on today's video, we are reviewing what is probably the biggest release of 2021 so far, and certainly the biggest box office wise so far, and that is Godzilla versus Kong. Now, obviously, we had reviewed the legendary MonsterVerse films on like a couple podcasts ago. So, if you want to check out, those films, the review of those films, be sure to do so. It'll be in our podcast playlist as well. And yeah, I'll pass over to Cam to explain sort of what this film's about and sort of what we're going to be talking about as well. So yeah, I'll over to you, man.
So scientists decide that it's a good idea to bring a massive ape, into human civilization, to do some science stuff. I don't want to give too much away.
Some science stuff's a
Yeah,
good
do
description.
some science stuff.
Yeah,
Godzilla is kicking about. He's not
doing Godzilla stuff.
delved into. Everything kicks off, and the title is the title of the film, Godzilla versus Kong. Prophecy realized,
Yeah,
that
lives
there
up to its
are
name.
punch ups within the film.
There is, and it's another one of those versus movies as well. So obviously, by that nature, you're going to get a lot of action, which is strange because this film is like less than 2 hours long. It went by really quickly, I think, for both of us. So, and yeah, so just before we break down this film, we are going to be discussing non-spoilers first, and then spoilers. I think just because it's a new release, and I know probably a lot of people haven't had a chance to see it or getting around to see it this weekend or whatever, and we're over Easter, but yeah, time codes will be in the description down below, along with our email as well, moviematespodcast@gmail.com. If you want to, check us out or over there. If you want to, hit us up with any questions or podcast suggestions, whatever you like. And yeah, man, I'll pass over to you, mate, if you want to open up the floor with non-spoiler remarks.
So Adam Wingard, director of the film, had been asked a question which was pretty much, because it was in the wake of the Snyder Cut. This
Yeah,
this film came out on HBO Max a week after the Snyder Cut, and he was asked, is there a cut of the film that you have that didn't get released? Like, is there footage that was within your vision that we didn't get to see? And he essentially said, no. If I'd added another hour of this film, it would have been another hour of people talking about monsters. No action. It would have just been more dialogue. And it is insane the amount of time spent on the human characters, because as I said in the podcast previously, that is actually more to my taste, because I don't love giant monster movies. But this film, I don't know who this is going to appeal to, because I feel like it's too much even for me. And if people already had their sort of patience tested with that in Godzilla and Godzilla King of the Monsters, I don't really know how they're gonna accept that here, because I genuinely don't know how it's possible that movies spend this much time with the humans. Those characters are capable of remaining so one dimensional. I presume it's because of the sheer number of them. There's 10 main human characters in this film. you know I did appreciate, however, the performances of Alexander Skarsgård and Brian T. Henry, but it's difficult getting through some of those scenes.
yeah, and I kind of feel like certainly the action, that's where the action sort of is up a level, certainly, and it comes to the forefront. And I feel like for me, out of the four legendary MonsterVerse films, this one probably has the weakest human characters in terms of they still give the human characters a lot of screen time, but that being said, the screen time is just used to explain a lot of sci-fi stuff that gravity defying apparatus, and these things are being built and those kind of things or whatever. We're scanning this, whatever. You know what I mean? It's classic sort of Star
Mhm.
Trek-y style, Star Wars style sci-fi stuff. And with me, actually, I think the standout for me personally was Rebecca Hall. Now, this is the first film I've seen her in since Iron Man 3. And she didn't have much screen time there, but I think she really held her own here. I think she was great. And there is something to be said. Like, I don't think any major risks were taken with this film, particularly. Any sort of major actor here has definitely been in a monstery sci-fi film before, or at least a sci-fi film before. I've mentioned Rebecca Hall, Iron Man 3, um, Alexander Skarsgård with Battleship, which is a very very sort of similar film, and those kind of things. And obviously Millie Bobby Brown with Stranger Things. So, you know, there's no massive risk taken in terms of actors who they've cast in particular roles, or neither is any particular risks taken with the actors in terms of the performance. Like, it's a classic Alexander Skarsgård performance. If you get me, you know, it's exactly the same character as he was back in when I saw Battleship like a decade ago. So, you know, that being said, I do still think there is human characters that can be cut here. I mean, I feel like I've been so harsh on Millie Bobby Brown recently. Like, I do really love her. I think she's a fantastic, you know, young actress. But I just don't think her or Gillian Dennison need to be in this movie whatsoever. Really, I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Brian Tyree Henry needs someone to bounce off of.
I get
But you know,
that. Yeah,
I feel like more intersection, you know, with you know, with the scientist characters maybe would have helped alleviate that, you know.
for
But
sure.
his back and forth with them, yeah, I do think was, you know, questionably necessary.
Yeah, no, yeah, for sure. I think he's definitely a bright spark of the film too, and that's where I'm saying like the action here is the best action we've for me anyway. I think we've seen out of the four legendary films. In terms of the CGI is incredible. It's so well shot. There's no quick cuts to human characters reacting to stuff. You know, like there was in Kong or whatever, or Godzilla. I feel like here you get to see action as it is. You know, just a monkey and a lizard just going at it in a big brawl. You know, it's fantastic. It's probably some of the best CGI I've seen in a quite some time. Yeah, it's spectacular. The action's great.
Yeah, I think a lot of my comments in the spoiler section of the video will allude to the fact that I didn't like this film, but you know, it's actually to the contrary. You know, none of my problems with this film are in the filmmaking. You know, I think the effects and the direction are great.
Yes,
But you know,
yeah, same.
the issues within this film are the plot, which is always what our reviews seem to center around. You know, we're never
Mhm.
like, you know, those effects look terrible because we know so much about that. We're kind of just like, you know, that plot thing is a lapse in logic because you know that's common sense, and I feel like, you know, anyone can really speak to that. You know, so I think a lot of my comments will seem very critical. But you know, I don't want it to overshadow the fact that I did really enjoy myself.
Mhm. No, I think so. I mean, it's a very engaging film. You know, I was captivated throughout, watched it in one sitting, and it's a very beautiful film to look at. You know, the lighting is spectacular, and not to give too much away, but there is a scene shot in sort of Hong Kong, I believe it is, and you know,
Hmm.
it's in the trailer, so it's not giving anything away. But like the scenery there of like the glow in the dark buildings is it looks like a comic panel or from some sort of manga. Like it looks remarkable. And you know, I think the action here is, you know, it's a lot of things with these versus movies. Like Batman vs Superman was criticized. You know, the fight was good, but it wasn't long enough. Or some people thought the fight was bad and it was you know too long. You know, it was a variety of criticisms of that one. Whereas here, I feel like the action is spot on. There's not just one encounter. There's a number of them. And it's consistent and it's varied. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of variation in from how it's shot. Even, you know, there's some great shots of, you know, even you get to see the action from the monster's perspective too, which is great. You know, it's as if like a camera is on Godzilla or something, or Kong, so it's great. And you know, I do kind of feel like the film should be praised for just how it is what it says in the tin. It's a Godzilla versus Kong movie, straight into that, no nonsense really. So fair play to them for that.
Yeah, you know, it is action heavy. You know, there are, you know, three major set pieces, you know, at least, and that is sort of movie standard. You know, you
Yeah.
should have sort of something in every act. You know, I think it does meet the requirement to call itself a versus movie, whereas you know, Batman versus Superman was a bit more of an ideological debate than a short fight and then
Yeah.
their mates. So I mean, it was you know questionable to you know sort of build that up in that manner. But here, yeah, I think it earns its title. And you know, for me, there wasn't really a dull moment. You know, I don't think that this is necessarily, you know, an improvement on writing compared to, you know, the last film we saw, Godzilla King of the Monsters. But it is probably the best time I've had watching one of these films.
I agree. It's really captivating, mate. It's enthralling, and it's just a great watch. And it's interesting to see. I think we'll talk about that. You know, I was talking to my friend Reese at work about this film. Like, will it get another film? Because you know, I feel like, you know, it's worth noting, you know, this film did incredibly well. You know, especially overseas. I think it made like, correct me if I'm wrong, like 120 million dollars or something like that opening weekend. It did very very well. So it's just, given the circumstances, that's incredible. And I think, if you know, pandemic aside, you know, I think this film would have been the top grossing film, probably of the year actually. certainly out of the MonsterVerse films. So it's interesting to see
Mhm.
whether it'll get a sequel or a spin-off or whatever. But I mean, I kind of concludes my notes for non-spoilers, mate. Again, I kind of bottled it with notes because it was just that much action. I couldn't really make that much. But anything from yourself, mate?
Well, to sort of say to you about the idea of a sequel,
Yeah,
I would struggle to think of a concept, and I think already they have struggled to think of it, and that's a team of writers. The second film was really just meandering and set up for this film. It was kind of like what is the purpose of this film? Because it's not entertaining, and I don't think it's good either. It didn't develop the character in any way. Like you know, leaving that film, we didn't know anything more about Godzilla, and we didn't have our opinion changed of Godzilla, by the end of that film, as opposed to by the end of the first film.
yeah,
But here that there is more development for every character, so it is definitely an improvement, I think, upon Godzilla King of the Monsters. But I don't know if a sequel is necessary. Like I think I've
yeah,
seen all that I need to of definitely Godzilla. Like especially with him being unable to communicate in any manner. But I feel like there's no way to keep that exciting. They're just going to keep adding new disposable one-dimensional human characters. Like
yeah.
I feel like I'm done with Godzilla.
And even that with spin it on its head as well. Like even with Kong, I feel like this was Kong's movie. This was almost Kong Skull Island 2 in a sense.
Mhm.
So I kind of feel like if you kind of develop like another Kong film where you give him more chances to communicate, I feel like it runs the risk of being like a Planet of the Apes style ripoff, where it's like instead of like just human-sized apes talking, it's big apes talking. You know what I mean? It runs that risk. I think for me, yeah, you're right. I think they've done what they can with Godzilla. Obviously, Godzilla's been one of the most publicized fictional characters ever in terms of was it like 36 or like I know maybe it's like 40 movies or something. It's crazy amount.
Yeah,
So
it's insane.
obviously by that stage, it's getting to the stage where obviously you're going to be repeating plot lines like King of the Monsters, I suppose, did in terms of who Godzilla has to fight there. And I get with cinematic franchises, like there is going to be certain plot lines that are going to have to be repeated. Especially with this kind of form of media. But I would struggle to think of a potential sequel, maybe like a Pacific Rim crossover if they really want to get their money in. Like that film would do really well. I think it would work, but there's things that we'll probably talk about which probably wouldn't help that in the spoilers. But I mean that sort of yeah, I mean that summarizes my thoughts on it, mate.
I was just going to ask you, where do you think it ranks among the four films that we've had?
Well, I think it's certainly the most enjoyable. I think it's certainly the one where the action is the best. Do I think it's the best film? Absolutely not. I think the best film probably is looking back, I probably think the best film is Godzilla in terms of like it's so serious, it's so gritty. The absence of Godzilla probably has hinged it a little bit, but that being said, that makes his presence on screen so intimidating, so like enthralling. So I probably have to say the best film is Godzilla, then Kong, then King of the Monsters. I think this is the worst film, but I think it's the most enjoyable, and
Mm,
that's why it's my favorite out of the four. That doesn't make sense, or doesn't make sense. It's the worst film, but it's my favorite.
yeah, of course,
Yeah,
of
yeah.
course.
Okay. So what about
I
you
I,
then,
I
mate?
think quality frequently doesn't come into what I enjoy. I said to you the other day and in the episode about the MonsterVerse that I've been
Yeah.
watching Green Lantern recently, and it's
Yes,
it's
mate. Yeah.
fun.
It's fun. It's a fun
Sometimes
time. Yeah.
something that you can recognize as absolute shit is just a good time. But this film, I think it definitely is not the best written. I don't think it's the worst written, because they set such a low bar with Godzilla King of the Monsters. So if I was to tier list it, and I think we're actually going to make some videos down the line
Yeah.
of actual
Post videos.
tier
Yeah.
listing. Because we've covered a countless amount of franchises at this point. I think it'd be interesting to talk those through because sometimes we just arbitrarily give a number to something and we're
And
just like
sometimes it
yeah,
changes.
we watched
Yeah.
we watched it 8 out of 10. So I
Yeah.
think like
Yeah.
upon reflection of
Exactly. Yeah.
seeing the entirety of franchises, I think a tier list is a good idea. But here, I'd say balancing writing and enjoyment. For me, it'd be Kong Skull Island, Godzilla versus Kong, Godzilla, and then very very very
Very low.
low Godzilla King of the Monsters.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's fair. I mean, I think a tier list videos. We've covered it probably. For me anyway, like every sort of big franchise up to this point, other than maybe like Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, which I'm sure we'll talk about within the next year. But you know,
Mhm.
like you said, you know, done MCU, DCU, Star Wars, you know, all those ones. So I think tier list videos would be definitely fun. And you know, I'd have to say you're right. You know, I think King of the Monsters is probably the least enjoyable of the four. You know, it's a filler. It's like a filler episode of a TV show, mate, is what it is for me.
What does Reese think of that one compared to the other ones?
I think you know, Reese is a big, and I think you know Reese is a big fan of these kind of movies, so I think he does quite enjoy it. But I know he really liked Godzilla versus Kong. He absolutely loved it. So, and you know, so did I. I think I think it's a very sort of entertaining sort of. It knows what it is, doesn't take itself too seriously, and I think it's going to do
Mhm.
well. But I mean, any points from me, mate?
Well, of course, right now in the UK, cinemas are closed. I think there are select cinemas open in America, for you to be able to see this film. Do you think that your experience and enjoyment of this film was affected by the fact that you couldn't see it in the cinema?
I actually think it's a rare instance of like a yes, just because the action is such a spectacle. As I said, the effects are marvelous, but even visually, the film looks great. In terms of you know lighting and saturations and sort of things like that. So, you know, I think I would absolutely love to see this in the big screen, mate, and hopefully you know one day we'll get a chance to if they ever show like an extended cut of this or something or those kind of things. But what about you, mate?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about, films recently, and of course, we've talked a lot about new releases, but they've been, very, sort of sit down chat kind of movies,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
courtroom or, political or, something, the more Oscar bait films, so
Yeah.
there hasn't been any high spectacle since Wonder Woman 84, which was the last film that we actually did get to see in the cinema. So yeah, I think this is the only actions, that this is the only new release action film that I've had to watch at home really. Aside, I guess, from Raya and the Last Dragon, I think that would have been nice to see on the big screen.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was a good
But here,
film.
yeah, I think this is one of the few that was greatly affected by that,
Yeah.
especially because we're taking notes and everything, so we're already 10% distracted. So I think sort of having that compulsion to have to sit and watch it probably would have helped me
Take it
absorb
in.
the action a bit better.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, Callum. That's a great point. And
Hmm.
it is an experience. Like it is a spectacle. Like I actually think it did deliver on the hype. Looking back in the trailers, like they were very good trailers, and they don't give a huge amount away, really. Sort of you know upon reflection on that, but yeah, that being said, I think it does what it says in the tin, mate. There's nothing really much more to be said about it from me in terms of, you know, it doesn't take itself too seriously. It's a film made by fans of it for the fans, which I think is vital with this kind of franchise. That's why the MCU's been so well. Like Kevin Feige's come out multiple times and said, no, we employ people who are first and foremost fans of the comics. So that's why the films are becoming more comic accurate, and that's why they're so successful. So yeah, I think it's a really good sort of solid release of this year where I think you know pandemic if the pandemic wasn't a thing it would have done really well you know internationally too.
Yeah, because I mean, I think that this film is, getting critically better received than Godzilla King of the Monsters, and that was
Mm.
still successful enough to propel this film out. So I mean,
Yeah.
there's clearly an audience, and I think it's probably a similar audience to a franchise that we talked about recently, and with an episode coming up either before or soon after this, Fast and the Furious. I think it's the same brand of sort of switch off, dumb, enjoyable action film.
Oh, completely, mate. 100%. 100%.
So, Matthew, if you don't have anything further, I suppose we have to ask the famous movie mates question, which I don't know if it's asked on any other channel, but
It's
massive
world
hit or
famous
piece of
now.
shit.
I've missed the massive hitter pizza shit rating system. It feels like a while since we've done it. I think maybe the last time we did it was probably like Raya and the Last Dragon, maybe if we did a non-spoiler review of that. I think for me, it's of course a massive hit. You know, I've said my piece on that. You know, I think it's a film where people who are hardcore fans of Godzilla or Kong will absolutely love it. It's maybe not traditional King Kong, like they never really call him King Kong, in sort of these films. But that being said, I think it takes sort of old classic concepts and sort of flips it on its head too. Like by nature, I feel like it is a Kong film first and foremost too. In terms of Godzilla isn't really a massive factor until maybe later on. But that being said, you know, I feel like that's the right choice because we've already seen two full Godzilla feature films and Kong's only had one. So I think by civil elimination, it's probably better to give him more screen time than one because in these sort of versus films, it's always hard to balance amount of runtime of each character. That I actually think Batman vs Superman did that well. I feel like if anything, the Clark Kent Bruce Wayne split was reasonably equal. Maybe Clark Kent had a little bit less to do from me looking back on that film. It's hard to say because the most recent one I watched was the Ultimate Edition, which has a bit more Clark Kent
Yeah,
stuff.
I think people say he had something like 52 lines or something, which I mean, in a film with your name in it is ridiculous.
Yeah, I know. But here, yeah, it's a massive hit, mate. Massive hit. What about yourself?
It's probably the worst movie in recent days that I've enjoyed, because I think I don't know whether I'm becoming more or less more or less cynical about movies,
Mm.
more or less critical. I think how do you feel? Do you think you're being more lenient on films these days?
I think the opposite. I think I'm being a bit more critical because obviously in the last couple of weeks of the channel, we've sort of went through a bit of an Oscar phase where we're reviewing more sort of serious, as you said, like sit down movies where they're a bit more thought provoking. Sort of, there's no real action. It's more of like characters talking about having these ideological differences. So I feel like for me, I'm being a bit more critical. But with this film, it's one where you can just switch your brain off and have some popcorn, whatever, snacks, and enjoy it. It's a classic sort of it's a classic sort of film where a 10-year-old Matthew would have absolutely like lapped this thing up. He would have absolutely loved it. And I still love it as well. Like it's a guilty pleasure. But if you'd showed this to me 10 years ago, it would have been one of my favorite movies of all time. Without doubt. Like I would have absolutely loved it. So I think for me, I'm being a bit more critical. So, it's a testament to for me anyway, like how well done this film is. What about you, mate?
Yeah, I think I've proven myself to myself, over the last few months that I think that there is no definitive taste when it comes to movies, because there are certain things where I've thought, oh, I don't like this genre, I don't like that genre. I've pretty much said, I don't like westerns. But then, the odd one slips through, like Back to the Future Part 3 is,
Yeah, that's
in
great. Yeah.
essence a western. So I think you can't make a definitive ruling on the kind of film that you're going to enjoy. Frequently I go into a film, expecting to hate it, and then I at least enjoy it, or I go in expecting to love it and then hate it. So I mean, I don't think there is any definitive formula of, this is the kind of film we made, this is the kind of film you'll enjoy.
Yeah,
So I
exactly.
think
Yeah.
our expectations and enjoyment are, very the thought process is just dedicated to each film. I think every film is a new experience. There isn't one mindset to go in with for it. I'm trying to sort of bring down that wall of expectations. So I think I have become less critical of films recently. So I think I have a lot to say about this film in the way of negatives, plot wise. Just as a film, as a piece of content to enjoy and to appreciate, massive hit.
Yeah, mate, I think you're spot on there, to be honest with you, mate. And obviously, for me, spoilery wise, it's a lot sort of, how would I say, we'll get into spoilers now. Just obviously, time goes there.
Hmm.
I feel like for me, it's very, and this is going to come across. I really don't want people misinterpret what I'm saying here. I really like this movie. It's just a lot of the plot lines seem silly. It seems quite sort of, you know, sort of like PG-12 level plot where it's like, you know, there's a lot of Star Trek style gizmos that people play around with. There's like a huge, like, well, let's just, get out of the way here, like a mecha Godzilla that humanity has to build. And the villain here is the human villain. With these kind of versus films, you always have an antagonist where the two come together at the end and fight the bad guy. And every versus film has it. And here it's no different. And for me, I think here the villain is the most cliche businessman who has an idea in the world. Like it's exactly, we've seen it a million times before, haven't we?
But also, do you consider him a villain?
Well,
Because
it's
near
interesting,
near
yeah.
the end of the villain, sorry, near we talked about in Godzilla King of Monsters, Dr. Emma Russell, who plans to bring all the Titans out onto the planet Earth to essentially level it so that they can start anew, and then life can sort of prosper. So I mean, she was trying to commit genocide. It seems like this guy, the film wants us to think he's the villain. So it is
It's a
the
good
it
point,
is the
actually, yeah.
assertion of the filmmakers that this is a bad, evil guy. But I mean, he was making Mechagodzilla, essentially as like a Tower of Babel Batman concept of how to stop the Justice League. It was
Yeah,
a
yeah.
contingency plan for
Uh,
if Godzilla tried to attack. And Madison Russell, played by Millie Bobby Brown, makes a comment near the end of the film that Godzilla was provoked into war, and that was the fault of the antagonist of this film. And I feel like that's just a bit ridiculous, because I feel like someone having a contingency against a dangerous being, especially one that, is entirely unrecognizable, he isn't human, he isn't it's an unprecedented potential threat. And,
Yeah.
I feel like, saying that to him is like saying, that if you know that someone has a gun to stop you, if you attack them, that it's justified to shoot them before they have the chance to shoot you. It's like they're there just as a precaution, a contingency.
Yeah.
And I don't understand that's not a reason for war.
It's a really good point, man. I really didn't sort of consider that before. And I put it this way, I've said I've said this thing about, a lot of these Monsterverse films, like they always get the human reaction spot on in regards to how humanity react in real life to one of these things. Like the first thing humanity does when Godzilla exits the water is shoot him. The first thing they do really when he enters the fray is, create a big mecha version of himself just in case he goes rogue. And fair enough, it is what humanity would do in real life. So maybe I can't be too critical on that portrayal there, not portrayal. But yeah, I think it is an interesting one. It's a really it's sort of, it makes it a bit more compelling in my head actually. Maybe I'm thinking I'm a bit too critical there. But what did you think of Mechagodzilla in general? Like it seemed a bit confusing to me as to how it operated on its own, as if it was like its own entity sort of thing. It was quite bizarre. But what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, because I think using one of the skulls of the three-headed beast from the previous film, like I think that is what makes up sort of the structure
Yeah,
of the, so it's, metal coating over this skull, and then, there's a pilot within another skull controlling it. Yeah, so I don't know how it goes rogue, they never really explain that, how it, just operates independently. I think that it looks incredible,
it looks great. Yeah.
but it does kind of fall into, we talked about, uh was it, no, it was Fast and Furious, we sort of compared to Michael Bay, but this kind of comes across a bit like a Transformers film,
Yeah,
at least in the third act.
yeah, it reminded me a little bit of did you ever watch like Power Rangers SPD back in the day when they've kind of got like these, do you know when they morph into like the what do you call, like the Megazord, is it?
Megazord.
Yeah, the
Hmm.
Megazord. It reminded me a little bit of that, but that sounds really insulting. Like I did quite enjoy that final battle where like Godzilla and Kong have to sort of team up and acknowledge each other and stuff. It was fantastic. Um, one thing I will say about this film too, a lot of, coincidentally, like same as you, like a lot of my notes are spoilery notes are quite negative, whereas my non-spoiler ones were quite positive. Maybe I don't know if that balances it out, but I think for me, a lot of the dialogue in this film, it's like scene ending dialogue where like a character says something menacing to the camera, or important for a camera that'll sound great in a trailer. So like you'll see Rebecca Hall's character go like Kong bows to no one, or Alexander Skarsgård character going like the world needs Kong to beat Godzilla, like those kind of lines where like they're clearly like not well thought out in regards to how the scene will play out, but they're thinking that's one for the trailers. Yeah, do you know what I mean? If that makes
Yeah,
sense.
where they're trying to like drill home, to try and make something iconic, like,
Yeah.
because,
Yes. Yeah.
pretty much every famous quote in movie history is an accident. It's just one, circumstantial, line within the project that just somehow connects with people.
Exactly.
And yeah, it feels like a lot of films these days are trying to, like, you know artificially create that, to try and be, well, what could we say, Superman 2 had bow before Zod, so we'll have our, our, sorry,
Yeah.
kneel before Zod. Don't come after me. It just feels like, they're trying to create an iconic line, but it feels very contrived. Like it just comes across as, that's their intention, rather than it just feeling organic.
Yeah, mate, I think it does. I think it does, and that's kind of where I feel like again the monsters sort of come to the forefront here and really take the film um by the reins and sort of have to take it where it needs to go. And I feel like we're kind of saying it is a Kong film, more than a Godzilla one, and I kind of feel like that's where my sort of criticism of the other human characters, like Millie Bobby Brown's character and Julian, I think Julian Dennison character definitely doesn't need to be in here, but Millie Bobby Brown's maybe has more of a reason
Like
to be.
he's the genius that just decides to pour a drink on it.
Yeah, he's the lovable rogue. Yeah, I know. I actually think he's quite good at Deadpool too, to be fair. Like I think he's a funny guy, funny actor. I don't know, I just don't think he worked here very well. But that being said, I do feel like the final battle really does live up to the hype. It's a fantastic sort of conclusion, and it gives it finally gives you're a winner. Do you know what I mean? Like all these versus films have like oh, who's gonna win that? Who's gonna win that? This one just has a definitive winner, which is great.
Well, I mean, I suppose that there were two rounds. We saw one in the first act and then one in the third act. And I think like Godzilla won the first and then Kong won the second. Is that right?
Yeah, I'd probably say yeah. I'd probably say there was actually, maybe for me anyway, my unfortunately there was kind of three. There was like the one where Godzilla wins. There's one where Kong wins, and there's one where like Godzilla like dislocates Kong's shoulder or something. Like I feel like that was kind of his as well. But yeah, I think Godzilla definitely won. Oh, sorry, Kong definitely won that sort of second encounter, if you know what I mean.
So like it is kind of hard for me to identify, which part of it is, the Godzilla versus Kong, like which is the
Yeah,
fight,
because
because there's in Batman versus Superman, there's this, brief sort of interaction where they just look at each other, and then the fight is the fight. You go, this is what the film's been building to,
mhm.
but then having a fight so early on, I thought, okay, this is good, like rivalry establishment, but then but by the end I was just like, which one was like the fight?
That's a good point. I know what you mean as well. Exactly what you mean, buddy. And yeah, I kind of feel like the movie even points it out itself. Like I think Alexander Skarsgård character goes like round two goes to Kong or something like that. So it's interesting to see that maybe it was sort of supposed to be a 2 or 3 round system rather than have a definitive central fight to the film. And that's where I feel like the action really goes up a level from the other four films. Like there's just no holding back. They just like have an excuse to evacuate everyone out of the city, and then there's just a massive brawl. Like it's what you pay for when you come to see this movie. Like let's not make a mistake about it. Like that is the main crux of the film, I suppose. So like people who watch this film want to see two monsters just beating the shit out of each other, which we got. So I was, by all means, I was happy with that. You know what I mean?
This film, well, we've compared it to Batman vs Superman, and I think it is the easy comparison, especially in recent years.
Hmm.
And that film was sort of criticized for building up this, this big rivalry. Even though these characters are iconically allies, but it was building up to this big fight. But then, it suddenly,
Yeah.
turns into them teaming up together to fight this, united threat.
Yeah.
And here that happens in even more of like a breakneck speed. Within it's not within
30
20
seconds.
minutes. It's within 30 seconds exactly.
Yeah.
It's Kong's lying on the floor, unconscious, and he needs he needs revived, and then they're just like, yeah, he's the bad guy, go fight him, and then they're essentially just like fist bumping and
Okay.
beating the shit out of Mechagodzilla. Like
Yeah.
it works within the film. I think it works
Surprisingly, yeah.
contextually, but when you think of it conceptually, it is really. I think it's a lot to expect of the audience to just sort of like go with that breakneck pace and
Yeah,
into
exactly, mate.
something so different.
Yeah, oh, for sure, Callum, like for sure, man. On paper, the film sounds so silly, but in actuality, it really works well. One thing I'm not a huge fan of about this film is the whole like Hollow Earth situation, where like that is Kong's domain to rule. It kind of makes Skull Island sort of meaningless because that was kind of Kong's domain, whereas here, um, I just kind of feel like that's where it got a bit ridiculous for me. Is if like there's no way it was intended that this was where this franchise was going back with Godzilla 2014. Like it just feels like two polar opposites. But that being said, I just can't see where it kind of sort of brings in the question of I struggle to see a potential fifth film here because like we've had Godzilla fight, we've had Kong fight, we've had Godzilla fight again, we've had Kong fight, and then we've had sort of Godzilla and Kong fight. So it's kind of like, okay, where do we go from here? Because you kind of had sort of the pinnacle of the Mechagodzilla, where it's almost like a nice like bit of poetry there. It was like, okay, these two titans have to face a creation of humanity. Like it makes sense. But that being said, I just can't see even the Pacific Rim route would feel very similar to this in the sense that
Mm.
it's a robot built by humans that they have to fight. I can't see where they go unless they do something crazy where like they go through other dimensions or have to fight other versions of themselves. Like that maybe would get even more ridiculous than what this film is, which is very ridiculous. Like where do you think it could go with it, if anywhere?
I would honestly struggle because as you mentioned, Pacific Rim, the mechanized robots within that film are controlled by the good guys of the film,
Yeah.
and I you would think they would recognize like for like and be we're the good humans, you're the good kaiju. So I mean, I don't feel like they
Yes.
would fight. But then if they're just fighting along side by side, that could be any one of their own individual films. It doesn't need to be a team up. So I feel like anything that they do going forward is gonna struggle to not feel artificially created, like very contrived. A word that we struggle to think of, but probably just gonna pepper throughout the rest of this episode.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I kind of feel like, mate, it's almost one problem I think that Marvel Cinematic Universe has is that for me, always in my heart, no matter what plotline happens, in the MCU, it will always be a child of on this. It will always have peaked with Avengers Endgame. Nothing will ever captivate my imagination or my attention or my excitement ever the same as that film. I just know for a heart that's just how I feel. I know I get that that might not be the audience-wide consensus, but I have a similar issue with this film. Is like this is like the most excited I can ever imagine myself getting about this type of film. Whereas like I think that's the biggest thing they can do. Like theoretically, like the MCU, okay, could do other things with other villains, but they can never recapture those like the gravitas of killing off three main characters. That nothing will ever come close to that. Does that make sense? Because I kind of feel like with this film, it's the exact same conundrum of like where do you go from here because you've done the peak. It's only downhill.
yeah. Yeah, I think if you peak like 22 films into your franchise, you're doing pretty well.
Yeah,
Well, I mean that that's not my opinion, but I think
I know what you
that's the
mean. No,
wide
yeah,
consensus. That,
yeah,
that is the best film that they've produced. So any following project from that, you're sort of enjoying the cool down. You might not get as excited, but, provided they keep pumping out quality. It's kind of just continuing that
yeah.
ride from that peak of excitement.
Hmm.
But here, yeah, I feel like it's just going to be a dramatic drop back down to the quality of Godzilla King of the Monsters. Like I think any other future attempt at making a film, it'll be very difficult to be a good film, I think.
Yeah, no, for sure, mate. I would have to agree with you. It'd be a difficult one to recapture.
And of course, like no matter the quality of anything, we'll probably still talk about it,
Oh yeah,
for the sake
definitely.
of
Yeah.
for the sake of discussion. If it's to the quality of the like the other two Godzilla films, I feel like if you have 3 out of 5 films that are in my opinion not enjoyable, I feel like that's a poor ratio to have at that infancy of your shared universe.
Definitely, yeah, no, I think you're right, man. It remains to be seen, I suppose, doesn't it? Remains to be seen.
I hope hopefully I mean if you just had a yes or no, do you want to see more of this franchise? What would you say?
Uh, Strangely, after everything I've said in this podcast, probably no. Just because I don't think I could recapture the excitement or the spectacle that was this film. If anything, like I would love to see a more down to earth version of a Kong film, similar to Peter Jackson's back in 2005, where it's more true to form rather than the Hollow Earth stuff, where it's like kind of like it's almost like extraterrestrial in terms of the sort of the creatures there. I just preferred the Peter Jackson version, where it was like Kong just fighting giant versions of what Earth already has, like T-Rexes or crocodiles or insects. Like I just preferred that ground down to earth story about him sort of falling in love with a girl. Not falling in love with a girl, but like how would I say? Like it's the classic sort of Beauty and the Beast scenario, should I say? Whereas it's not really shown in these films. It's where I actually thought it was going to go with Brie Larson, but it never really goes there really. So yeah, that's probably what I would like to see. Anything from yourself, mate?
Yeah, if we're going on the binary yes or no, I'd probably also say no. This film, as you said, is really a Kong film. It begins and ends with him. So far, like I think it is. In the sense that, do you think Batman versus Superman? Do you think it's a Batman movie or a Superman movie?
That's a really good question. I do feel like it is a reasonably nice mixture of the two, but if we're gonna lean sort of 60-40 either way, this is gonna sound strange, man. I almost feel like it's kind of that is a movie about the middle characters, like about your Lois Lanes and stuff like that. Like that is where it like because a lot of the screen time taken is used with Lois Lane and Scoot McNairy's character and Lawrence Fishburne's character. Like a lot of that movie is about the universe and the other characters there. But if we're gonna lean either way, probably Batman. But I kind of feel like the middle characters cover that middle ground really, really well there. Actually, what about you?
There is more of Batman in it, but I think it's Batman reacting to Superman, like injecting himself into his life,
Yes,
creating a
yeah,
plan to stop
it's a
Superman.
really good
So I
point.
feel like if it's a character responding to another one, I feel like that's sort of the principal character, and they're trying to get to their level almost.
Mhm.
But here, I do feel like it is Kong's film, and then then Godzilla sort of injects himself into the scenario. He
Yeah, mate,
brings himself
for
into
sure.
relevancy. But yeah, no, I do agree it's a Kong film. So if we have two of each, I feel like I don't know what ground there is left to mine. You know, we,
Yeah,
we've we I think we can all agree we don't need to see any more of these human characters. No one's like gagging to see, what's Madison Russell up to, 4 years
yeah.
down the line.
Mhm.
I don't think there's any human in it, gripping enough, to want us to really, sort of desire that. If they went back to the 70s with Kong, I think that might pique my interest a little bit, because I think Brie Larson was quite impressive to me, in that situation. So I mean, if they went back to the 70s, maybe, but I feel like I've seen enough.
Yeah. No, mate, I'd have to agree. I think the only option for me would probably be like a prequel in the 70s or 80s, mate. Yeah, for sure.
So, this film, of course, is about this iconic battle between these two titans. And, very early on, the first scene, in fact, is we see Kong, in his domain, in on Skull Island, and Dr. Andrews, Rebecca Hall's character, puts forward the idea that Godzilla would come for Kong, because quote there can't be two alphas. And to me, I just felt that that completely betrayed what we know about Godzilla.
Yeah.
Everything that we have to go on, indicates that he's just a benevolent creature that balances the scales whenever there's a threat. It's not when there's a threat to his alpha-ness. It's a threat to
The ecosystem,
I mean
just in general.
to humanity, I
Yeah.
suppose, or to the ecosystem. So if, it's meant to be this sort of cosmic, balancing of scales. As Dr. Serizawa said in the first film. So I feel like he should recognize again, the phrase like for like. You should see that you're both benevolent figures there. In aid of
Yeah.
humanity. So I don't even really understand like the principal conflict. I think it is, to use our favorite word again, very contrived.
Yeah.
People said that about Batman versus Superman, but I mean, I sort of get the mentality that if you're a human watching an alien destroy, your building, kill thousands of people, even if it wasn't his intention, if in your mind, you feel that he's responsible, I can sort of understand, the human way of thinking, that would be a conclusion some people would come to. But here,
Yeah.
I'm just baffled. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I'm stuck in this paradox of just thinking like, well, they're both there as benevolent figures, which is proved by the end. Where they both take on Mecha Godzilla. But if they are these sort of prehistoric titans, who can like have a sense of the universe, like I just feel like the conflict just makes no sense.
Yeah, man, for sure. It's a great point. And especially with the depiction of Godzilla in the first sort of two films of his, like he is that heroic character in a sense that, like you said, perfectly, man, he balances the scales of the ecosystem really. And I kind of feel like for this film, they did want to maybe suggest Godzilla was going down the villainous route, even though it's sort of explained he was, trying to hunt down the Mecha Godzilla or whatever it was, or even Kong. So it's an interesting one, mate. But looking back, it did I feel like they could have created the conflict in a better way that would have made more coherent sense of the story, rather than Godzilla just wants to kill Kong because he's threatened. You know what I mean? It seems weird.
I think by the end, the Godzilla is the villain of the film, because I can sort of understand the mentality of destroying the Apex facility at the start of the film, because he was just, I guess, he sensed their creation of Mechagodzilla and was trying to destroy it. But then he just, throws caution to the wind, by the end of the film, and he just like levels half of Hong Kong,
Yeah,
in his
I know
fight with
it's
Kong.
gone. It's
Like
gone. Yeah.
Kong is there to stop Godzilla, or like Kong is there, like again, as we said, as a benevolent figure, just like he was in Kong Skull Island. But Godzilla is, the classically depicted, creature of chaos, and there's sort of no redemption for that. He presumably killed again thousands of people, but this time he wasn't actually stopping a threat, until 5 minutes later.
Yeah, there's also, it's a good point, man. There's also like a funny, but I don't know if you caught this or maybe I misinterpreted it, But like Chris Stuckman had said something similar in his review. Like there was a moment in the final battle where like Godzilla does something that is quite weird. Like it's a bit where like he throws Kong in a building, and then like there's a zoom up of his face, and he goes like or something, like he makes a little sort of like
Yeah,
laughing noise. Do you know what I mean? Like it was quite bizarre.
yeah, because I know there were a lot of theories that the Godzilla that Kong was actually fighting was Mecha Godzilla, but that didn't turn out to be true. People were sort of like, they had their arrows being like, that's not the real Godzilla, but
Yeah,
it was.
it was.
He is actually
Yeah.
responsible for all of his actions in the film, and yeah, to sort of him giggle at the chaos he's causing, and all the lives he's taken. Yeah, it was. I think it does maybe strip him of his protector
For
or hero
sure,
status
definitely,
that
mate.
was sort of cemented in the last two films.
For sure, mate. I think that's the spot on sort of analysis of it. Actually, yeah, I think you're right.
We talked about in our previous episode the idea that this is it's a shared universe in its infancy, but it already seems to be sort of borrowing from other ones to sort of replicate their success.
Hmm.
The Hollow Earth kind of sort of acts as this universe's quantum realm, and
Yeah,
Godzilla versus Kong, the conflict is similar to Batman versus Superman. The Titans are like the Kryptonians in Man of Steel, and how do you feel about these movies like cherry picking from other shared universes? Because I think it's a fine thing to do. It's just confusing to me the ones that they chose to
yeah.
take from, because certain
Especially the Hollow Earth
motifs
stuff.
that they've chosen to replicate, mass audiences didn't appreciate.
For sure, I mean it's unusual because these movies are so successful, and it goes to show like that's why four of them have been made. And it's an interesting one because I feel like it has tried to pick from some movies that aren't necessarily the best, but strangely it uses them to its favor for the most part. I mean, the only one of those ones that you mentioned that I was maybe not a big fan of was the Hollow Earth stuff. But I suppose you're gonna have to explain where these guys come from because like they're huge hundred meter tall, um, you know, titans. So they're not just gonna be surely someone would have seen them somewhere, roaming about. But I know what you mean, mate. It's cherry picked from a lot of sci-fi genres. That's one thing we mentioned about Space Sweepers, but I think we both acknowledge Space Sweepers did that really, really smartly, really well. And
Mhm.
to a degree, I think this movie has too. It's taken a lot from a lot of different genres in recent years, and I think I kind of feel like this movie, and actually the reception to it actually surprises me because I feel like in the last 5 years, there's been a lot of movies about these kind of kaiju films. Obviously, we've mentioned Pacific Rim a lot. Obviously, Battleship I've mentioned, and those kind of films, Rampage as well. Those kind of films where an animal, a CGI huge animal, has to fight something or another animal. So these films always do great box office wise. So it just surprised me this film did that well critically. But that being said, I'm happy that it did because sort of like I'm sensing you kind of felt you enjoyed it, but maybe didn't think it was necessarily the best narrative or the best plot line. That being said, it's still one of the more enjoyable films out of the MonsterVerse ones.
Yeah, I could definitely, see through its problems and then just look at the core of, what is it trying to do? It's trying
Yeah,
to entertain. Some, you can't, I suppose, judge every film by the same standards. You can't expect the same from every film. I don't think anyone went into Godzilla versus Kong, or at least if you did, you're going in the wrong way, thinking it's going to be high art.
yeah,
You know, you,
yeah,
I never expect that from any film because I think it's probably a, pretentious point of view. But so I tried not to have any expectations, and here I just wanted to have a good time, and I did have a good time. So it did succeed. Thinking about negative things about the plot doesn't make it unenjoyable. I don't think that does never happen for me really.
yeah,
Avengers Endgame I think probably has a good plot, but I wasn't entertained. So I mean that's sort of an instance where it was flipped on its head, where you can recognize the quality, but you can say I just didn't enjoy that. Like
yeah.
with the Godfather trilogy, it's a marvel of writing and direction, but it just didn't come together for me. And I think that's I think sometimes you just have to accept that you're not gonna fully adhere to the general critical consensus. So this film, of course, it's called Godzilla versus Kong. So you're expecting, conflict. You're expecting fights between these characters. But in all honesty, I don't think the conflict adds that much to the film. Aside from action, but I feel like it's at the sacrifice of Godzilla's character because I think when you have, these two entities fighting, they can't be equally good. There has to be one slightly more antagonistic force, and I think that they put that onus onto Godzilla. and they don't really recover his character, but by the end of the film, I sort of,
Yeah.
I think that they managed to do that in Batman vs Superman, where Batman seems a bit like a dick, throughout the film, but
Yeah.
you can still go like, I mean, again, that is, a human mentality to this alien problem, which is sort of unfathomable to us. But here, because they're not characters that can communicate, we can't understand their thought process. We can only really understand, their their actions, and
Definitely.
Godzilla's were murderous. So,
Yeah, definitely.
I feel like this film maybe could have worked better if it was Godzilla and Kong. Not Godzilla versus Kong. It was just two plot lines. Godzilla taking down Mechagodzilla, and then Kong investigating the Hollow Earth, and then they team up, they fight Mechagodzilla, and they both return to the Hollow Earth. I just feel like, and then that's where the franchise ends. They're now buddies, and they both have dominion over this home world of theirs. I feel like that maybe would have felt more right and more fair to the characters.
Yeah, it's you sort of raised a couple of good points there, mate. I think for me, what this film does, it places Kong in the foreground. So I think automatically audiences' sympathy and audiences' sort of positivity will be more attracted to him. Whereas with Batman versus Superman and to a degree Civil War, like a big part of Civil War was like Team Cap or Team Iron Man, like it gave you the option to choose. I think Batman versus Superman does the same. Batman's a bit of a dick, but a lot of people sort of think, yeah, but like you don't probably people think he has a point. That's a discussion for another day, I suppose, if we do tier list. But anyway, I feel like with this film, it doesn't give you the option to choose because Godzilla seems like a bit of a dick, and Kong seems just like he just like a giant ape who does cute things here and then. He's quite a sympathetic character. He gets a lot of sort of tender moments, I would say, compared to his original first film. But I feel like, yeah, you're right. And the films that you go in and expect to be high art, they never amount to that. It's always it's so true. But like the films that you expect to like the most are always the ones that the films that you like the most are always the ones that you don't expect. I feel like for me, so the ones I feel like are high art are the ones I never thought would be. The Graduate is film I think is high art. Did I think it was going to be good? Yes. Did I think it was going to be overrated? Yes. Is it overrated? I don't think so. I think it's a piece of high art. Same with same with Back to the Future degree, like in its own genre, it's a piece of art. That's why it's probably one of the most iconic sci-fi films ever. In terms of, I didn't expect it to be that good, but it was. It's films that you don't expect that blow you away. And I feel like for this film, no one should have that expectation that it's going to be like a very well constructed film that's going to make you think about it at night when or whatever. You know what I mean? Like it's not a thought provoking film. It's just a film where you can turn your brain off, eat some popcorn, and just enjoy the spectacle of marvelous CGI.
Because your favorite film is 500 Days of Summer. Do you
Mm-hmm.
remember either the first time you watched that or what brought you to watch it?
Well, it's interesting you say that because our friend Jack, good friend of ours, I know that's one of his favorite films, and when he had sort of said about it, I was saying, oh, I suppose I'll give this a go, and I never once thought I'd expect to sort of love it as much as I did, and it's always for me that the shows that you don't expect to love that you do. That's why there's a good show on Netflix called Atypical that I really love that I didn't expect to love as much as I did. So I think putting expectations is a thing I'm trying to wean away from, because it leads to disappointment 9 times out of 10, doesn't it? And looking back, films like Logan, certainly sort of and Civil War to a degree kind of had that negative detrimental impact. Whereas with this film, I'm luckily I didn't have any expectations for it, and it worked in its favor because I really liked it.
Yeah, me not watching trailers is a big help these
Yeah,
days.
I imagine
Because
for sure. Yeah,
I've watched, I think, one trailer for Black Widow,
there's a new one
and
today
then
actually as well.
yeah, I've purposely avoided it, and then I think I watched the Batman trailer, and I watched most of the DC trailers, but Marvel I try to steer completely clear because I'm already like, it's already sort of child friendly content, so it's not going to have any huge surprises.
Yeah,
The biggest surprise that we had was at the end of Avengers Infinity War, and they're never gonna do something like that again. So it's gonna be an A to B, and then the hero wins over the villain. So you kind of have to be surprised by the moments, and I think trailers do often ruin that. So I think when it comes to expectations, not watching trailers is a big help. But you know, I've addressed everything I have to say about this film. Do you have anything further?
Mate, that's everything for me, buddy. I suppose like if we go back to another movie mate's sort of rating system, the classic. Well, it's not even a movie mate's rating system; it's just a world-renowned rating system. Out of
Hmm.
10, what would you rate out of 10? I don't know where
Yeah,
I'm going to go with
classic
that.
us. Am I right?
Classic us. We
Uh,
definitely created that. So what would you give it out of 10, mate?
you know, again, this is an issue where I don't even remember what I rated. You know, films that we talked about on Monday. You know, with the rest of you know the other
Yeah.
three of the franchise.
Mhm.
You know, so of course I kind of felt like I was tolerating Godzilla. I quite enjoyed Kong Skull Island, and then I just was not engaged whatsoever in Godzilla King of the Monsters. So I do think that this ranks probably two out of four, you know, within that tier list. So if I rated, I think I rated Kong Skull Island an 8.5 or an 8. If I didn't rate it an 8.5, I'd give it that retroactively, and then I'd probably give this film an 8.
Yeah. I mean, I'd probably have to give it some a sort of similar score. I'd probably give it it's hard to say, and I'd probably give it an 8.5. Actually, I think it's probably the most enjoyable, certainly the most action-packed of the MonsterVerse films. And I don't know if this this review is the length of a podcast. It's been a long review, but I
Oh,
think,
well over. I think it's been an hour.
but that being said, mate, I kind of feel like we've gotten a lot of sort of thoughts generally on these kind of versus movies off our chests, and obviously a lot of the thoughts just generally because this will probably conclude the MonsterVerse, filmography. So we've kind of had to wrap up our thoughts as well retrospectively. So it's been a good recording today, man. Thank you very much as always. And
Okay.
thank you very much for all those who've listened. Appreciate you. If anyone has stayed around this point, I don't think anyone has, but if anyone has even
Maybe
skip
10 years down the line.
10 years down the line, yeah, 10 years down the line, credit to you. But that being said, hope you guys are all safe and well, and be sure to comment your thoughts on this movie down below as well. I forgot to say that. If you've seen it, we'd love to hear anyone else's thoughts as well. If Reese wants to let us know what he thought of it too. But yeah, hope you guys are well. Be family and friends all safe and well too. Take care, and bye bye.
Bye bye.